Humanity 2.0 10 Principles for a Compassionate Society. Aviram Rozin with Haz van den Burg. Introduction. Inclusion is not bringing people into what already exists. It is making a new space, a better space, for everyone. George Day. What does Humanity 2.0 look like? What are the guiding principles of a compassionate society? How can we collectively evolve towards it? What kind of environment do human beings need in order to feel happy, healthy, complete, and connected? This has been the question of my life in many ways, and I would like to share whatever answers I have found up to now. In the book you have at hand. The present book is meant to give an outline of the elements which, in my opinion, constitute healthy individuals and societies. It can serve as an inspiration for people to build communities, create social change, and grow towards a healthier future. Simply said, if all the principles mentioned in this book would be implemented in a society, it will, by default, be a compassionate society. I meet many people who would like to change humanity. Maybe this book can provide them with some tools and ideas to create a new ways of living together. Before we continue, I would like to briefly explain how I understand the word compassion. I see compassion not just as a feeling or an intention. Compassion is born out of a sense of empathy for others, which then leads to concrete action to overcome suffering and create well-being. Compassion is something very practical for me. It is not something casual, but a foundational principle of my life and of the society I envision. Not only individual acts can be compassionate, but also the way we structure our lives together. A compassionate society is a society that by its very nature will give rise to compassionate behavior. Compassion needs to be based on understanding. If we want to help others, we have to deeply understand them first. Without deep understanding, we may act with the best intentions, but cause harm. Understanding arises from deep listening and observation. If we do not take time to deeply listen to others, we may act from our own preconceptions, which might not be very helpful. Solutions are born out of dialogue. They are not one size fits all. We work together to create ways to support them best. Hence, this book is not just about compassion, but also an attempt to try and understand human and animals' nature. To begin our journey of better understanding human nature, we start with the continuum concept. The continuum concept. One of the key ideas for this book comes from the 1975 Jean Lindelof book, The Continuum Concept. Lindelof spent 2.5 years with the indigenous tribe in the Amazon. This turned her view of how we are supposed to live as humans upside down. She came to the conclusion that as a species, we are born with a set of innate expectations, which come about through evolution. These genetic expectations she calls the continuum. As human beings, we are born with a certain expectations. We are programmed to be treated in a certain way. For instance, a baby expects to be held in its mother's arms, to get its mother's milk, and so on. If these innate expectations are met, it will lead to happiness, good health, and well-being. If they are not met, it will inevitably lead to challenge in the development of the child. While Lindelof mostly talks about infants and young children, I want to take this idea of the continuum one step further. and see what expectations we have for the entire span of our lives. An example of such an expectation could be to receive emotional support from our community, or not to be in constant competition. On the one hand, I want to reflect upon how our inborn expectations nowadays are often not met, and how this creates suffering for many of us. On the other hand, I want to think about solutions. How can we change our society to fulfill our innate expectations, nourish compassion, and enable us to live emotionally and physically healthy lives? If we want to reflect on our innate expectations, we have to look at the environment that shaped them. John Bowlby, who laid the foundations for the attachment theory, which we will discuss later, already realized in the 1960s that we can only understand the human psyche in the context of what he called our environment of evolutionary adaptedness. It is our history as hunter-gatherers that molded us into who we are as species and defined our continuum. He writes, "We can therefore be fairly sure that none of the environments in which civilized or even half-civilized man lives today conforms to the environment in which man's environmentally stable behavioral systems were evolved and to which they are intrinsically adapted." This leads to the conclusion that the environment in terms of which the adaptiveness of man's instinctive equipment must be considered is the one that man inhabited for 2 million years until changes of the past few thousand years led to the extraordinary variety of habitats he occupies today. I do not mean to say that everything used to be better in the past. Yet we cannot just assume that our current society meets our needs better. We have to critically compare modern and traditional ways of living. Of course, modern society has made some advancements in terms of technology, healthcare, democracy, human rights, and so on. Traditional societies should not be overly romanticized. They have so many horrible practices, like female genital mutilation or elder strangling. I am happy we left such practices behind. Yet, I do believe we can learn things from cultures that are quite different from our modern, westernized way of living. Our way is but one of many. It has its advantages, but also its disadvantages. Other cultures show us other possibilities. They can be a useful source of inspiration in trying to heal the afflictions of our society and in our search for alternatives. The structure of this book. Taking the idea of the continuum as a starting point, I want to delve into different topics. We start with some preliminary considerations about the self-reliance we will need in order to start choosing a different path, and about the sense of abundance that will come from fulfilling our continuum. The body of the work consists of 10 chapters, divided into 2 parts. The first part of the book looks at children. We will talk about birth, immunity, babies, and education. The second part of the book will look at the overreaching structures of our entire society, our drive for competition, the economy, and our sense of community. We will look at what brings us closer together as a species, and how we can start our own communities, and how we can bring a sense of community and cooperation into our notion of development. The final chapter brings animals into the equation, as they, to me, are also a part of our community. The book ends with a reflection on how sustainability connects with all these topics as an underlying thread. The book you have at hand contains many references to literature and further reading and to scientific studies. There was not enough space to go into every topic in depth. We are standing on the shoulders of giants, as the saying goes. Therefore, in the endnotes, we have tried to include references to the most relevant literature. The values discussed have also been rigorously studied using scientific methodology. It is important for me to include the most important studies in order to make the book accessible to many of us who see great value in modern science.
This is Orville Radio, voices from the city of dawn.